Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of On the Fly. I am Sean Lacey, and today we're joined for a special Valentine's Day episode covering couples finances with my co-host and business partner, Zach Owen, and his lovely wife, Mrs. Lindsay Owen. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. We've had a great week. We're excited to wrap it up with a podcast. It's the first time Lindsay's been on our podcast, and we can't wait.
I've listened to all of them.
She has. She's been in the background doing her work while we're recording, and so she did some experience listening to them.
We love it. Well, hey, Lindsay, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we appreciate the opportunity to hear perspectives from both you and Zach about finances before your marriage and then even finances after your marriage. So, as most of our listeners know, Zach and Lindsay got married back in November. I was blessed enough to be a part of it, but clearly they were both the star of the show, and I don't think they took their eyes off of each other the entire time. But it was a tremendous experience down in Florida, and now you guys are coming up on almost, is it 3 months of marriage?
Yep.
Yeah.
In a couple days, 3 days, we'll be at 3 months. So,
well, actually, by the time this episode airs, it'll already be 3 months. So
true.
We love to see it.
Actually, technically, it's 3 months right now because we got married in the church.
We did.
First.
So yeah, we did get married in the church on November 9th, and then we had the wedding in Florida on the 12th. So
with everybody.
Today, I guess, is technically our 3-month anniversary of this podcast recording. So.
Thanks for reminding us.
we love to see it. Great work, guys. So my first question, and I want each of you to answer this separately, and we'll have Lindsay go first. Growing up in your family lives, what was the focus and what was the perception surrounding money and family finances?
We talked about money all the time. My dad definitely talked to us about it. I don't know. I can never remember a time when he didn't. He would read my sister and I a bedtime story from the Armchair Economist. And I mean, like, I was like 6 years old. I bought myself with my birthday money a little ATM so I could keep track of all my money. I had like a 50-cent allowance that I'd save up. And in second grade, he helped me open my bank account so I could save all my first communion money and babysitting money. So he talked about it like all the time. It was very open.
Yeah, my family was pretty standard, not quite, I think, as open or encouraged, I guess, as Lindsay's family, but it wasn't, we didn't not talk about money. We didn't kind of push it to the back burner. It was pretty standard. I got paid for chores, and, my parents always would talk to me about, how I should save money rather than spend it, and, kind of teach me that if you can afford to put money away and invest it, then you'll see exponential growth in the future. You've seen the exercises with, like little kids where you give them a marshmallow and leave for a minute and tell them, if they don't eat it and you come back, you get like an extra marshmallow. I don't think my parents quite did that to me, but that was explained to me, and they were a crucial part of my financial understanding growing up. So while I wasn't overly encouraged, quite to the extent of Lindsay's family, my parents did a great job of explaining money to me and teaching me the ropes at a young age.
It's great to hear that it was a focus for both of your families growing up, because like a lot of people that we talk to and we work with, it seems like there was none of that. So now that you guys have that backbone, and over the past few years of you guys dating as well, and now into your marriage, what are some of the principles financially that you're going to make a priority within your marriage, and then eventually when you have kids, in your kids' lives?
That's a good question. So I think the number one priority of our finances and of our budget is our happiness. So while we want to have a strict maybe a tough word, budget, as far as, we don't want to spend frivolously, and we don't want to put money in places it shouldn't be. We don't want to live in our spreadsheet, so to speak. We want it to be a guideline. with how we should live our lives and how we should spend our money. But I always say the best financial advice is what helps you sleep at night. And Lindsay and I are very open about our finances.
Yeah, I think openness.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, my dad made like a really big deal of like checking our bank statements to look at the interest that we got that month. And then there was some healthy competition with my siblings of who had more in their savings account and who had more interest that month. And I think that kind of has rolled over to us. It was
yeah.
When we opened our W-2s the other day, it was a kind of a drum roll to see who made more last year. And
spoiler alert, Lindsay won.
Wow, good job, Lindsay.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, it's kind of fun to have like that little bit of like competition almost that makes us, it's so encouraging, but it's like completely in a positive light. Just being totally transparent with all of our spending, and we're definitely supportive of each other.
Yeah,
spending when we want to, but encouraging the saving to watch it grow.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, Sean, the principles that we live by, I think, are happiness and openness, right? Communication. So like Lindsay was saying, we are moving into, I guess not moving into, we have been utilizing kind of joint finances for a while. I want to talk about this more maybe a little later too, but there was early on in our relationship kind of a discussion about, do we want to have our finances joint or separate? And I know that's a big question for a lot of people who are getting into a serious relationship. And while I think, like everything in life, there's a balance, different people should implement different methods. I would 100% of the time advocate for joint finances. I think it adds a layer of trust and a layer of transparency to your relationship. It turns you into a team a little bit more in the finance area of your relationship. Your finances are wide open to them, right? If you're joint, a couple who has joint finances, so you're not hiding anything from them. Your money isn't separate. It creates a little less, awkwardness or tension. And for us, it works fantastically. I think that the joint finance really helps in our principles of openness and happiness.
We actually still have to, I haven't formally changed my name yet. So once I do that, we are going to open new accounts together. But once we got engaged, we decided to kind of almost like dip our toes in the water of how we wanted to split, pay for things. And so right from the get-go, Zach just started paying all of our bills from his account. And then for the last year, I saved everything I made. Used that to pay for all of our wedding expenses and bolster up the savings account for a down payment at some point whenever we find a house.
Right.
It's ready. So that's kind of how we decided to start it out, and it worked really well for us.
Yeah, to be clear, Lindsay mentioned that we dipped our toes in after we got married. Having that conversation is definitely something people should do before they make the decision to get married.
Actually sharing finances.
Right, exactly.
Well, before we got engaged, we talked about it a lot, but our finances were completely separate.
Yes.
As far as
on paper, bank accounts, technically they still are.
Technically.
We share a credit card, I guess is the most joint thing we have, but like Lindsay said, her name isn't changed yet, so we don't have an actual account. But as far as we're concerned, our finances are joint. Like Lindsay was saying, we implemented a strategy to see, how well we could pay for things out of just one of our bank accounts. So I started paying all the bills from mine, and Lindsay started just pocketing every paycheck she got. And that strategy worked really well for us. It taught us a lot, and it was really fun to watch the number in her bank account go up.
And while yours didn't go up.
Right, exactly.
So I want to highlight a couple things you said there. Number one is, and it seems this comes up on a lot of our podcast episodes, but the best financial advice is that helps you sleep at night. And that kind of ties into another fan favorite book we have, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and just defining what your rich life is and defining what your priorities in life are. Maybe you don't enjoy going on lavish vacations, but you want to drive a nice car. you can spend money in different ways. It just depends what you value and what you enjoy. And then I also liked what you guys said about the healthy competition that you both have between each other. And I think competition is phenomenal in any relationship, whether it's, a romantic relationship or even just between friends, because I think competition brings out the best in people. And it also has the potential to bring out the worst in people if it's painted in a negative light. But along with that competition, it's you guys have figured out a plan, and you figured this plan out before you were engaged and then even before you were married, and you were both on the same page about it. And I think that's the biggest area in relationships where issues arise, and especially financially, because there's some statistic that it's like 70% of divorces are because of financial reasons. And most of that comes down to both partners not being on the same page financially. And when you're not on the same page financially, it ricochets and it bleeds into other areas of your life and just breeds negativity. So I'd like you guys to kind of go through what that conversation was like before you got engaged, and then even after you got engaged, how you wanted to plan out your lives together financially.
Absolutely. So, talking about your rich life, defining your rich life was a great way to put that. And that's a talk we've had well before we were engaged about where we wanted our money to go, at different stages of our life. And right now, we want our expenses to be a little bit more on the travel side of things rather than some materialistic items. I know a lot of people like to put money towards vehicles or clothes or other things that they enjoy having, and that's a conversation you have to have with your partner. If you don't, then there's a very good opportunity or chance that you and your partner could have different definitions of a rich life. And so while you're working towards becoming rich together, you're simultaneously working towards separate goals at the same time. So if Lindsay wanted to put her extra expenses towards travel and I wanted to put them towards cars, we would be at a crossroads when we finally get that extra money in our bank account, and then we have to decide where to put it. And I think that can cause a lot of stress and strife in relationships. We've had the conversation, and like I said, we're more towards the travel side right now. I drive a 2008 Honda Civic, and she drives a 2014 Subaru. He bought both cars for under $10,000 a piece.
And they're awesome.
And they are awesome cars. And I love cars. I work for a car company. I would love to have a sweet, brand new, like sports car, truck, something to drive around and love and be proud of and be flashy. And at some point I will. But while that's number 2 or 3 on my list, number 1 is travel and spending time with Lindsay. So
I think the way that we look at it is that right now, like, we're young, we have time to focus on ourselves. We have bodies that are young and able to, hike miles and miles. And that's what we want to use right now. One day when we don't have the time, or we're not, we're more in retirement, and we'll enjoy things, I think, more at that point. And for now, it's like the tangible stuff, it'll be there forever.
Right.
We want to do experiences.
So planning your rich life, it should go a little farther into planning your before rich life too. We've talked about.
We definitely, like, in college, got on the same page. Zach's a little bit more of a natural spender than I am.
I am. I took a little more work to get as frivolous and as financially literate, I guess, as Lindsay was at first. She was naturally more of a saver than I was.
Yeah. He was, like, definitely in college, like, when we dated, if there was something on his mind that he wanted, he would just go get it. Made him difficult to buy presents for.
Yeah.
But he would just buy it and maybe just go buy the first one he saw too. Where I have always been someone, if I want something, I'm going to think about it for arguably too long and research where can I get it for the best deal possible. And for like a while, he probably didn't really quite get it, like why I did that. If he was hungry, he'd go buy food.
Yeah.
He'd go to Chipotle or wherever. And I had to push and push for him to, like, cook at home. After a while, like, I told him, like, we're going to add up all the money you spent on fast food this month. And then we're going to go to Aldi and I'm going to show you how I can do so much better.
Yep.
So like that's one area where like early on we discussed like we're not spending extreme amounts of money on eating out every week. We are cook at home people.
Right.
We're not like designer brand people. We really both could care less about the name on our clothing or whatever.
That's one thing I think goes unnoticed with people. We talked about, fancy cars or nice clothes. Eating out all the time costs enough money to be in that category. If you're going to eat out once a day, twice a day, it's going to add up to a significant amount of money that could be, equivalent to a car payment or, clothes shopping multiple times a month. So cooking at home is something Lindsay taught me how to do, and she does phenomenally. So that's a really good area that we worked on, and we planned ahead for our before rich life. Another thing
we talked about that early.
We talked about it early, yeah. Another thing that we're still planning ahead for now is kids. Well, we're only married for 3 months or so. I think you should talk about kids early, and even before you're married too. That's another thing. You don't want to get married to someone and finally have that conversation and be on 2 separate pages. And we're talking about how we're going to handle working with kids. And so as long as you're on the same page, I think just having that conversation is a great way to ensure that you and your partner are on the same page, on the same wavelength. You're going to get along, you have the same vision, and you're working towards the same goals in life.
I think talking about anything too, finances before you're married, kids before you have them, it's always a good idea to have like big conversations early, because if you wait until like the moment that it's happening, you're going to be emotional and you're not going to be, the conversation won't be as good.
Right.
If you wait until you're emotional about something, it just won't be as productive.
Yeah, and you want to have those conversations based in logic and reason and not emotion, because your thought process could be different in both cases. And also a good point too on the kids. You don't want to just assume someone wants to have kids. You get engaged, you get married, and then at the end they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't want kids," and then you're like, "Oh, well that's not good. That doesn't match up with what I'm thinking," and then everything could fall apart. But when and I like too, Zach, the segue you did there into the kids portion of the thing, because that's another great question I've been wanting to ask is, what have you guys talked about, and do you guys have a game plan of how you're going to set your kids up for financial success, even when they're not old enough to understand even what money is?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing like we ever talked about, we weren't even dating yet, and we met when we were 18, and I asked him at that point how many kids he wanted, just to make sure. And his answer was as many as my wife wants. Worked.
Yep.
So I passed my test, and I told him I want 4 to 6.
Yep.
And he didn't sweat too badly, so we were good from there. But we've actually talked about that recently, because we were really, really fortunate. Both of our parents were willing to help us with some of the wedding expenses, and which was amazing. And we just started like talking a little bit about like, what do we want to do for our kids? Because both our parents had different approaches to like how they settled on an amount. And my parents had a set amount for each one of their kids that they'll be, gifted. And we talked about like the benefits of both, and of course like what a dollar means versus what it could mean down the road.
Yeah.
And after we talked about that, we started talking about college savings, and I think we've agreed that like how my parents did it, and his parents really like showing their kids like, this is your money and you get to buy something with this money, and that is it. Like at the store, like my parents did not buy us toys outside of our birthday and Christmas.
Right. I think what it came down to as far as college, as far as finances, both of our parents did it in different ways, but we like the fundamental principle upon which their methods were built, which was giving us some money for free, but then, to help us out, but also having that not be enough to cover the whole thing. So we did have to go to work and learn the value of hard work and what it means to have to pay for education and earn money for yourself. And our conversations have gone, earlier in our kids' lives from college too.
Yeah. But we actually did disagree when I asked him, like, how early do you want your kids to start working a long time ago? Because I started babysitting and depositing my money when I was 12.
Yeah.
Babysitting like most weekends. And I think it was good for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once I turned 16, like after that, I always had a job. All through college, like I always had a job. It was normal. He didn't always. His family did more of like the good grades, and he was in sports and I wasn't. Those are your jobs. So we kind of talked about it and had to like try to find a happy medium, because I know I want my kids to work and learn what it's like to be busy, and make it happen. So we've talked about like all the way.
Yeah, communication is the common theme we're coming back to. As long as you communicate, just talking about these things is beneficial. We have talked about each of our parents' individual parenting styles and how we can take the things we liked and the things we didn't like and combine them between ourselves to make a bit of a hybrid and get the best of both worlds to implement.
What we're saying is we're going to be perfect parents.
Everyone thinks that, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yep, you got to teach your kids the value of $1 too. We discussed that. I told Lindsay,
I loved that. I loved money when I was a kid. And I'm sure my kid will be the same way, honestly.
And that's something you have to talk about, because if, we do well, and that's something people do if they're well off themselves, and that can get swept under the rug. They don't teach their kids the value of $1. And I said, if we're filthy rich by the time we have kids and I have a heated driveway, I'm going to turn it off in the winter sometimes to make the kids go shovel it. So.
Yeah, and it comes down to what your priorities are for raising your kids, and between the discussion and the communication with each other, you're picking things from what your parents did for you, Zach, picking things for what your parents did for you, Lindsay, and combining them to make what in the moment will seem like the most perfect plan. But there's always going to be curveballs. There's always going to be like adaptations you're going to have to throw in. And I think that's the beauty in just having the opportunity to raise kids and having the opportunity to teach them and guide them along the way. And in terms of some strategies that like we've talked about in the past, there's the suggestion of you start a credit card for your kid when they're like 4 years old, and you put them as an authorized user on one of your accounts. You pay a utility bill with that. And by the time your kid's 16, they have 10, 12, 14 years of credit built up and a 700 plus 800 credit score, so that they can go out and get any car loan they want. They can buy a house when they turn 21, so on and so forth. You look at the ideas of starting 529 plans when your kids are born, or buying a rental property when your kid is born on a 15-year mortgage and having it paid off by the time they graduate high school, saying this is your college fund. You choose to do whatever you want with this house. There's a lot of strategies, and I think the big thing is coming down to that communication between the both of you, such that you're in agreement and you have an ironclad plan to parent your kids and help raise them to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different methods that we have to think about as far as like the choice of how to save for your kids and get them started off well. Because I definitely think that giving them the initial like boost is something that we hope we can do for our kids, and giving them help like our parents gave to us, but also working really hard.
Yeah, those are both important things.
Yep, it's a fine line too between helping but also letting kids figure it out on their own. Kind of one other question I was curious about, and this relates both to financially and just in general in your relationship. When you guys have disagreements, what do you do to work through those and at the end of the night go to bed happy?
That's a good question. So one reason out of the many that I married Lindsay is that she's a fantastic arguer. She handles disagreements very well, and that's something you have to do in a relationship. You have to, at some level, leave emotion out of it and keep in mind that you're a team. You are one couple, one team, one entity working towards a common goal. As soon as you are in an argument and you are trying to be right over your partner, you're wrong. When you get there, you're functioning off emotion. You just want to be right. You don't want to have the best possible outcome for you as a couple. You just want to be right. And that's something you have to set your ego aside, set your emotions aside, and work towards the best common goal for you and your partner. I think that's something that Lindsay does very well, and that's something I've been working on. I think as far as disagreements go, we're normally pretty good at handling them and communicating and setting a common goal and keeping that goal in mind and not trying to be right.
I've said to him, and I've said to friends of mine, when they talk to me about like having disagreements with their significant other, I think something so important is like arguing with love. Like, you don't like yell and swear at the person you love. Like, so even when you're mad, don't do it. You don't argue with your husband like you might argue with like a random person on the street. Like, this is a person that you should respect everybody, but like, this is a person you respect and you love, and like, they deserve some patience. There's barely like ever a time that I think it's appropriate to like really yell at somebody.
Right.
I'm sure there's a time.
Yeah.
But not frequently. And I mean, anything we come across day to day is like, it's just not worth it to like get mad. I think that we've done a pretty good job. Like, there's been definitely times where Zach doesn't understand why I feel a certain way, especially when we were dating and he was starting to try to understand the female mind.
Yeah.
Even once I just told him, like, really think about it from my perspective, and I think trying to find like something to compare it to is like the best way to understand why someone is feeling heated or hurt.
Yes, and that's
if
another
you can
good
just
point.
go in their shoes for a second, and when you love that person so badly and find a solution for it, you don't want them to hurt.
That's another good point. So the first one I brought up was what was the first point I brought up?
I don't know. I wasn't listening.
Don't argue to be right was the first point I brought up. Don't argue to be right, argue to overcome a common obstacle. And I think summarizing what Lindsay said was putting yourselves in your partner's shoes. And in my journey to be able to do that, it came down to kind of trusting your partner. And what I mean by that is there's a reason they're feeling the way they are, and there's a reason they're acting that way. If you can trust that there's a reason they're doing that and they're not just doing it for no reason, then it helps you put yourself in their shoes. I find myself, and I think a lot of people do, when they're arguing and the other person is, obviously in a disagreement with them in a different state of mind, you can't understand why they're acting the way they are. You can't understand why they're arguing the point they are. And as soon as I take a step back and realize there's a reason for that, they're not just doing that to be disagreeable. They're not just doing that to create an argument. You can put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, maybe this is why. And from there, I think it's a little easier to overcome the emotion, to overcome the desire to argue to be right, and instead start arguing for a common goal between you two.
It's always good to remind yourself too, when there's definitely one time Zach like puts his foot in his mouth and says something that's just so bad. And like, you do have to just remind yourself, like, I know him and he loves me and he didn't say it to be bad. So like, don't make it more than it is. You just say that again and think about it harder.
Men and women are different. You have to know that and understand how your partner's brain works.
Yeah. And Zach, I like the way that you summarized everything there too. And to add to it, I think when you have a disagreement or argument, you both are trying to get to a solution. So arguing to be right, it doesn't provide a situation where both of you win. And I compare it to like sales. When you're working with a customer, you want to find the solution where both of you win. The same things in a relationship and in an argument. So along with that though too, it's also important to understand that the way men and women are wired is completely different in terms of how we perceive emotions and how we perceive certain situations. So seeing the other person's perspective is huge. And a piece of advice I got from someone who's been married a lot longer than you guys and for a very long time, they said that whenever their wife comes to them with a problem, he always asks her, "Do you want me to provide a solution or do you want me to listen?" And he asked that every single time his wife vents to him. And ever since he started asking that, they've never had an argument over a time when she's come to vent to him. And I think setting the standard and setting kind of what you're expecting out of that conversation from the get-go will provide a lot more clarity. And it also helps guys not go into solution mindset immediately.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday.
Yep. That's
Because
something.
we do that. I'll tell him, like, I'll be really like fired up, and I'll just tell him, like, before I tell you the story, I don't want you to fix it. Just listen. Or I'll just tell him, like, I want you to get mad with me. And he'll be like, okay. And then he'll just get mad with me about something from work or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely a great method, because when you are just looking for support and you don't want a solution, and sometimes you just don't.
Yeah.
It just make you mad.
The clarification does help, because I know a lot of men are more solution minded, and a lot of times women just want to vent. They want someone to listen to their
Every once in a while.
story. Sorry, Lindsay's mom is blowing up her phone. Oh, okay, turn it on. Yeah, so while Lindsay and I don't claim to be experts on marriage, we've been married for, like I said, 3 months.
We do try to absorb the advice.
We do try to absorb the advice, exactly. And that is great advice. That's something we've been trying to do for a while now, and it's worked great. Clarifying, what she wants out of an interaction. And like I said, it always comes back to communication is a huge part of things.
We were talking, like, knowing that we were going to do this tonight, we were talking about, like, I don't know, different advice that we would give people or not. And I think, like, when I said try to soak up advice, try to seek out advice too.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm Catholic, everybody who gets married in Catholic church has to do pre-Cana, which is like premarital counseling. And I thought it was fantastic. We were paired up with an older couple who has way more experience than us. And essentially, like, we would just sit with them. They would give us advice, or they would ask us, like, what's something you're worried about? And then we would just have a conversation about it. And I think, like, the more that you can do that, like, the better. Just collect all the advice you can and decide what's going to work for you. Give it a shot. And you're not, like, nobody's perfect at it.
Yep. It's a process.
And seek out people that have a lot more experience in the realm than you do. And that goes for marriage, that goes for finances, that goes for anything in life. It's mentorship is huge, and seeking out advice. So
better than you.
To wrap up here, instead of our traditional questions that we close the episode with, I want to spin this a little bit different and have you guys give advice. So I want you to look at this from a few different stages in life. In the first stage, I want you guys to give advice to someone who is not in a relationship but is looking for a relationship, and how that they can best prepare themselves for said relationship.
You go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I think if you're not in a relationship yet, the best thing that you can do is not rush it. Because the worst choice you could possibly make is settle for someone who's not the right one. Just for the sake of not being alone. Being alone is better than being in bad company. So just work on getting yourself in a good position, work on getting to know what you want, and just working on yourself. I've told my some of his friends actually, who are single guys, and they're going through it, or they're going through a breakup or whatever, and I've told them, you need to reel it in. If they're like, you know, on Tinder too much, to put it nicely, I told them, I want you to behave in a way that makes your future wife proud.
Yep.
Because one day you're going to find her, and one day you're going to have to tell her about all the crap you did. So take it easy on her, and just don't make that big mistake that you're going to hate telling her about.
Right.
I think I mean, I had that mindset before I met him, and once we started dating, and it was like, you got any skeletons? And no, I don't.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think telling someone who is looking, or maybe even not looking for a relationship, I mean, and there are plenty of pieces of advice, but one, as I say, improve yourself, right? I mean, be the man that your future wife would want to be with. You have to improve yourself if you want to be with someone that you're going to. If you have an ideal person in mind, you want to be their ideal person. It comes down to being realistic. It comes down to having drive and discipline, and really setting your goals for yourself. If
you're going to have high standards for your partner, you better be worth it.
Yep.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, to also mentally preparing yourself for kind of the talks that we discussed about earlier in the podcast. If you are in a situation where you find the person that you might want to be with, you're going to have these talks about kids, about finances. Be the person that has their stance prepared. Be the person that in that scenario says, this is what I want, this is what my idea is, but also be prepared if what they want isn't that. Know what you can bend on, know what you can maybe give and take on, and know what your must-haves are. Know what your things that
non-negotiables.
Lindsay knows what the words I'm looking for. Know what your non-negotiables are. So be the person that you would want your wife to want.
Great piece of advice. Now, the next stage in life, maybe someone who they're in a relationship, they're considering getting engaged. What advice do you have there?
That's a good one.
I would just say, don't hold back on any questions that you have. If you're worried about anything, talk about it. He actually said yesterday, I think we were just like getting ready for bed, he said it's kind of weird how after you're married, you're just the same. And it's true. Like, any question you have before you're engaged, you're going to have it after. Any problem you have beforehand, you're going to have it after.
Your relationship does not change based on the status.
No.
At all.
So if you have an issue, like, it's not going to fix it to get married.
Yep. I like
That's
that.
true. If you're in the position where you could get engaged, and maybe you're obviously, I think most people in that position are nervous, deciding whether or not to do it. What really sent me over the edge and made me decide that I should propose to Lindsay was coming to the seemingly simple realization that I could and would be happy for the rest of my life with her. I mean, those are things you have to think about outside of finances. Am I going to be happy with this person for the rest of my life? And while that seems so simple to say out loud, while I did struggle for a little bit, deciding whether or not to, kind of pop that question early on in our relationship. And then I thought about that and I was like, wow, yeah, the answer is yes, resoundingly. No question about it. And so just thinking about that question made me feel a lot more at peace. And I kind of wish someone had told me that a little earlier.
Yeah, if you're trying to like decide if someone's the one, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a push for you to be like independent these days. And there's a push to say like, I don't need him, but I do. And I should need them. I don't want to be without him ever, pretty much.
Right.
Like,
And there's a clarification
I
there.
need him around
Yeah.
to be fully happy.
Yes.
I can be content.
And I need Lindsay to be fully happy. And
Yeah.
Sean, I know we got to wrap things up quick, but this is going to be my last spiel. Lindsay said that she needs me, and I do need her too. During our relationship, I've had plenty of my friends say, I'm looking for a relationship like this or that, and it's kind of like yours, but it's also not. Lindsay's so dependent or clingy.
Yeah.
And there's a difference in those terms. And there's a difference.
I want someone who's more independent.
And there's a difference in what makes that good or that bad. While I think in our sense, being clingy is a good thing. The clingy is, purely emotional. We need each other to be happy. Lindsay does not need me for anything else. If I were not here, Lindsay would have a car, she would have a family, she'd have a place to live, she'd have social life and education, a bright future. She would have nothing wrong with her situation. She would be totally independent. And I'm the same way. Yeah. The reason that we are married is because we cannot be without each other for purely emotional reasons. Not that she relies on me for a place to live or money or a car.
And now that we're married, it's like somehow we have this complete comfort with being codependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really good thing. It just makes us close, and that's how we're happy.
Yep.
Yeah. And you think about it, like, you guys are great separately and by yourselves, but together you're even better. And I think that's what you look for in a relationship and in a marriage, is when you both are together as one, it makes your lives that much better. So last part of the question, for those who have been married less than 3 months, what piece of marriage advice do you guys have?
That's a good one.
I don't feel qualified.
Yeah, we're pretty new. Communication, is my fallback. I think we're great at communicating, and I think that's what really sets us apart. That's what makes us so happy to be with one another. We don't have any issues that we shove under the rug and let bottle up and let boil over and have those create other exponentially worse issues. Communicating and being able to handle communication, being able to handle that criticism is something that you need to be able to do. If you tell someone, hey, if you have a problem with me, bring it up by all means. And then they do, one, they have to do it in the correct way so that they're not being offensive or attacking. And two, you have to be able to recognize that and be open to that criticism and take it with what it's worth and not take it as like you're being attacked. Don't get defensive. They're bringing it up to be productive and overcome a common obstacle in your relationship.
And I've been told by so many people, couples who have been married way longer than us, that you have to keep dating each other.
Yes, that's a good one.
And even after 3 months, like,
we go on dates.
It's not like it's been a long time.
Yeah, we're not experts.
But we've tried to like make a effort to have a date night to make sure everything's not just about work and getting things done. We'll have we'll just call it a date night, and it's like any other night, eating dinner in our house, but we just don't talk about work. Instead, we talk about our goals together.
Our travel.
We kind of just like daydream about what we need to do to like achieve the next thing that we want. We just don't talk to, turn your phone off.
Right.
Don't talk to your friends. Don't talk about work.
Never stop dating.
Yeah.
And your focus in that is completely on each other too, which it's like living together too. You understand, okay, you're with each other all the time, but is your focus on your relationship and on each other in that entire time? Because before you're living together, when you hang out, during that time of hanging out, your focus is on each other because you're cherishing that time. Like you guys having a long distance relationship for many months, when you spent time together, you weren't thinking about other stuff. You weren't on your phone. Yeah. So giving that focused attention is huge. And it often can get brushed by the wayside just because you think that, oh, we're together all the time, so we're always hanging out. But that's actually not the case.
Quality time is really important. Lindsay we've talked about that. She would prefer 30 minutes of uninterrupted 100% attention and quality communication than 3 hours of us sitting on the couch looking at our phones together but separate.
Yep, absolutely.
We didn't live together before we got married. We decided not to, and I think that like gave us more appreciation
A little bit, yeah,
for like
sure.
just a normal night at home. Still for us feels like a big treat.
Yeah.
From before we were hours apart. So
Mhm.
that helps us to enjoy our inside date nights.
Yep, quality time, never stop dating.
Absolutely. Well, hey guys, listen, I appreciate you doing this episode. I appreciate having you both on here, and you shared a lot of value, provided a lot of great advice, both to people who aren't dating yet, are in a relationship, considering getting married, and even those who are married. So I mean, I learned a lot just from having this conversation. I hope our listeners do as well. But I appreciate the both of you, and I'm so happy for you guys. And I look forward to doing this episode next year as well. So,
When we
do you guys have any closing statements for the audience?
I don't think so. I think my closing statement would be never stop dating. I think that's the best way to sum it up. I think this is a great Valentine's Day episode.
I think that what I've got in my head is my dad has said over and over, the biggest financial decision you will ever make is who you marry.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And for you and anybody else who's listening to this, like that is the absolute truth for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another kind of thing to think about when you're dating somebody.
Yep, absolutely. Sean, thanks for your time. Thanks for hosting. This is a great Valentine's Day episode. We appreciate it.
Yep. Not only is the person you marry the greatest financial decision, but it's also the greatest decision in your life. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for a great episode. This has been another episode of On the Fly. Y'all take care.